basically were interested in making one of the books into a film. And that was where the discussion came in. And then I started talking to smaller British film producers and film directors, because I wanted it to be a small, nice little cozy British film.
Right.
And Jason Figgis was one of the first people that I reached out to on social media. And Sam Beckinsale, who was part of that. And we connected, and the conversation began about who I was, because within the books is a small glimpse of what I went through. In fact, the first line of my book is 2 blue lines. How on earth did that happen? I'm married to someone who doesn't love me. And that's the first 2 lines of my book. And Jason said to me, Emma, would you be interested? Because I have nothing like your following. I have, I think, 350,000 followers, but then I live on a teeny weeny little island. So it's kind of all relative. But he said, with your following, would you be interested in having a look at this film? Because I gave him a sort of little brief background of what I'd been through. And I said, yeah. But I was reticent. I was a little bit worried. Because I'm years out of it, I personally haven't had any contact with my abuser for 5 years, but he's still niggling away at my children.
Yeah.
And I was worried that it would take me back to that dark place. But I thought, no, come on, be brave, Emma, be brave. You can do this. And it blew me away. It just, I mean, as I talk about it, I can feel I'm getting slightly short of breath. It was just breathtakingly, wow, light bulb moments. And what I found so special and spectacular about it, because I'm a huge film buff and I love TV, and because I'm a writer, it everything resonates with me. I love crime, I love all this kind of thing. But this not only talked to me, it did the opposite of what I thought it was going to do. It didn't take me to a dark place.
Yes.
It felt like somebody wrapping a blanket around my shoulders, putting me in a room with a nice warm fire, and somebody talking gently to me and telling me it was okay, that I went through what I went through and I was going to be okay. And that the shame, the disgrace, the guilt that I felt all the way through the process was not mine at all.
Right.
It wasn't mine.
Right.
It was his. And to this day, I mean, and you, as I tell you my story, I mean, some of your followers will find it extraordinary, the relationships that I developed throughout my journey of recovery. It helped them too, because I've forwarded it on to these girls who were also victims. In fact, in many ways, as much as I was the mother of his children, and as far as I know, you never can quite tell, but as far as I know, I'm the only mother of his children. I obviously now have to live with him with him in my realm, if you like, for the rest of my natural life. The other girls who succeeded me in terms of came after me, they can get rid of him. Because they don't have children with him. But their abuse was much, much worse than mine. Mine was very much emotional. He did not lay a finger on me. The others, not so much. But yes, it was, the film itself blew me away. And I found myself having to watch it over and over and over. It's so beautifully layered. And it is like therapy. It's like having free therapy. So yeah, I said to Jason and Sam instantly, count me in. I'm in. I'm there, because for me, I think for one of the hardest things, and I don't know whether you put this on your page, one of the hardest things is that when you go through, whether it's coercive control, emotional abuse, whether it's, well, all of this is abuse of some kind. If it's emotional, or people just threatening you or frightening you, or just putting that seed of doubt in your mind, relentless grinding you down, you don't realize it's abuse. And if you don't realize it's abuse, you can absolutely bet your bottom dollar that your friends, your family, often close family who love you, they don't know that it's abuse. And so the film itself is something to me that not only victims, survivors, and people that work in domestic abuse that have to see. Everybody has to see it, because they have to recognize it. They have to see it, you know, if they see a change of behavior in a friend, or the way, whether she's dressing slightly differently, or just a little bit less accessible, or a bit distant, or just slightly different, wearing, as I say, wearing different clothing. It's just, or spotting a change in their sparkle, or just, and also a way to broach the subject with them, because often victims can be very defensive. They don't want to admit it to themselves.
We protect them, don't we? We defend them and protect them, don't we?
Absolutely, absolutely. And that's the thing about the film, and so many advocates in the UK. We've had some really senior detectives, you know, chief constables, which is, you know, one of the most senior ranks in the UK in the police, of, you know, in terms of domestic abuse. We've had domestic abuse professors, doctors, saying that this film is going to change the world for everyone, not just survivors, not just victims, but for people. And also the other thing is, I mean, I've got two daughters, 18 and 20, and this event that where you're obviously going to come to in London, when we do it in London, but in Nottingham, my daughter is coming because she's 20 and she goes to Nottingham University. It's a preventative. This is another thing. Well, what I see this film doing is not only showing young women and young men what it looks like to be abused. So to prevent it, see the red flags, realize that actually horrific emotional and physical abuse is all wrapped up in this wonderful bubble called love. It's not love, it's abuse, but it's wrapped up so beautifully. And it's the love bombing at the beginning. It's the pattern. That's what they've done so beautifully in this film, is just to show you the pattern. And that's why everybody that's watched it so far, and we've had the reviews, have said they had to almost keep pausing it and going,
oh yeah,
you know, all the way through.
Oh yes. And we're going to talk about the movie here in a little bit, but I will say that yes, we were talking before we started recording, and I told you, and we're in agreement on this, is once you sent the movie to me and I watched it, it was like, I don't care what I have to do. I have to promote this. I am as passionate about this movie as everyone, as you, as Sam, as Jason, and all of y'all I've been in communication with. And I'm so passionate about that. With that, I want to hear your story. I want to offer you this space, this time, to stand up and speak out and speak your truth. Tell me where your story began.
Okay, my story began in the year 2000. I was 32 years old, and I was in a ski resort in Austria. And it was one of those sort of sliding doors moments where I think it was 2 nights before we were due to leave the ski resort. And I wanted to go out partying. Nobody else did. I wanted to go out partying, and I was one of the single girls there. And there was a lovely gay couple who said that they would come with me because everybody else was too tired from skiing. I think I'd probably spent the day falling over rather than actually skiing. So we went out that night, and this chap just came over and asked me if he could buy me a drink. He was very, very good looking. And he asked me the following, on our very last day, because he walked me back to the chalet, and he asked me for some après ski. And I remember him getting questioned. Oh God, it was mortifying when I think about it. Anyway, to cut a long story short, we started dating, but it was very much a distance thing. He was Dutch, I was English, so he was living in Holland, I was living in the UK. But very, very quickly, now I was 32 years old. I had traveled for 11 years on my own around the world from the age of 19. 18 actually. So very independent, very headstrong, very I'd been proposed to, I think, 3 or 4 times by certain guys who decided that I was the one. I'm very flattered, but wasn't interested in getting married, wasn't interested in settling down. But somehow or another, this guy managed to convince me that he was the one. It was extraordinary and actually baffling to many of my family and friends, because I had, as I say, been proposed to by some really, really lovely, eligible bachelors, but had said no because I was too. And my father always said, "Oh, she's far too headstrong. You know, there's no way." Anyway, nobody would be able to put up with her. She doesn't even know how to fold her clothes, and things like. I was utterly hopeless. But he did manage, and it was interesting because for the first sort of, I would say, 2 or 3 months, he just listened to me. He listened to what made me tick, what I was afraid of, what had gone wrong in all my other relationships. And looking back, he was information collecting. It was almost like data collection. And he, I would talk about the fact that I'm very much a country girl, was always brought up with horses, loved animals. The only thing that he ever told me the truth about, which was interesting, and this was only because he was afraid, was that I'm a big dog lover. And he said, "Oh, not so keen on dogs." Now, at the time, that wasn't an issue because I was in my 30s. I didn't have a dog, but it turns out he's terrified of dogs. Nothing's ever happened to him. He doesn't like them. That should have been my red flag.
Yeah.
Didn't like animals, but and that was the only thing he was honest about. But the rest of it was all very much about mirroring what I wanted from life, what I needed in life, where my vulnerabilities were. He was exactly the same. He also worked out very quickly that I'm a fixer. I like to fix people. So he would create problems within his past and in his life, and I would want to nurture him and make them better. And sure enough, I think he came over to the UK. We'd go backwards and forwards. It was fairly cheap because it's just a sort of ferry ride.
Yeah.
And very quickly he proposed to me, and I said yes. It was extraordinary. My parents were thrown, and we got married. And I'm not going to lie to you, there was something in my gut at the time that said, I'm not sure about this.
Yes.
But I also was 33 then, and my biological clock was ticking, and he was still playing the same game. He was still the same person. He was still lovely and wonderful. I think possibly and when I spoke to people about it, I was feeling a little bit nervous. They'd say that's natural. It's cold feet. And when I say, to cut a long story short, it's probably a bit too late now because I'm rambling, but we got married, and wedding day, lovely, even though it poured with rain. I do live in England, so that's to be expected. And then wedding night, went back to a hotel, different person. I was married to somebody I didn't recognize. He didn't hit me. He was just very, very cruel. Told me that he'd expected a different dress. And to cut a long story short, it was instant degradation and taking me down, and how he hadn't really enjoyed the reception and how he felt. And then he started to really badmouth a lot of the people that were there. And it was strange. And I thought, okay, he's had possibly too much to drink. He's very tired. It's a big thing for him. I was wife number 2. It was first time around for me. It was in a foreign country. And then we went on honeymoon, and things deteriorated even further, to the point that we ended up in a lovely place, the Dominican Republic, where he became racist, sexist. He was extremely rude to all the waiting staff, called them the most appalling names, to the point where I had to often leave the dining room because I was mortified, but I was also afraid to kind of stand up to him. But he would racially abuse some of the waiting staff, and I would just say, I'm terribly sorry. And I remember going back to the room one evening and saying to him, look, who are you? Because quite often I'd leave and then I would go to sleep. And when he'd come in at 4:00 in the morning, very, very drunk. Anyway, I remember saying to him, who are you? And he said, this is me.
And this is within days of getting married.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I'm talking 3 days. So we continued on this honeymoon, and I decided, because there was no intimacy at all, for obvious reasons, that I was just going to get back and annul the marriage. That was easy peasy, because no money had changed hands. Everything was in my name anyway, because he'd put no money into our marriage or anything like that. And when we landed at the airport, my dad picked us up, white as a sheet, and my mother had been diagnosed with stage 4 breast cancer. And so I realized at that point in time that putting a divorce or an annulment into the mix was simply not appropriate. And I think it was on my birthday, I suddenly discovered I was pregnant with my first daughter. It was at that point that he also then told me that he found pregnant women revolting, and he wouldn't be coming anywhere near me. And I can remember being referred to after I'd given birth to her as sort of looking like a cow. And also with the breast pump. I don't know whether anyone's ever used a breast pump. They do actually sound like a heifer, and he used to look at me and say, I couldn't find you more revolting. Anyway, as luck would have it, he did see the benefit in our child having a sibling. And so I remember him saying to me, look, she does need a sibling. Will you let me know when you're ovulating? And I said, yes. And I knew when I was ovulating. So I think it was 4 or 5 days later, I let him know. And he said, right, okay, I'm going to come up in the halftime of the football game. He impregnated me and then went halftime, went downstairs. And that was the only 2 times in my entire marriage that there was any intimacy between us. He then left when little one, who's just walked in, who's 18, was 4 months old. And that was when it really got very dark. And you think, you would already think that what I've described to you is dark, but actually it got very dark then, because I then started to make some discoveries about what had actually been going on in my marriage. Because I'd been pregnant for practically the entire time. I didn't know this at the time, but he was seeing somebody else. She didn't know that I existed, because she lived in Holland, but he used to make regular trips over there. And then eventually one day, because the girls used to have access to him, I mean, he before we managed to sell the marital home, because that was my biggest thing, I managed to get him accommodation through a very dear friend of mine, so that he was no longer in the house. But it's illegal in this country, unless the person has beaten you or is a threat to your safety, to change the locks. And so he would, once I got solicitors involved in order to expedite the divorce, he would say to me as he said goodbye, just remember, I will kill you in your sleep one night. So don't sleep too well. And so as a result, I would sleep with the children in my bed, not so that he would kill them, but to prevent him or possibly stop him from killing me in my sleep. Because if he came one night and realized I'd bolted the door, I could be arrested. I mean, that's how ridiculous the law was then. I'm going back 20 years. And then I discovered, as I say, that this lady was on the scene. I only found out 2 years after he'd left me that actually that was the case. He'd told me that he just found me repulsive, repellent, disgusting. I remember once him finding me on the kitchen floor, curled up on the floor with both babies asleep, crying and just saying, please, can we try this again? Because, I'm a new mum, and my dreams have been shattered, and we haven't given this a chance. And he looked at me and I don't think I could do this to anybody, but he could. He looked at me and he said, pick yourself up off the floor, woman. He said, you're vile. You are repugnant. You disgust me. He said, if I can just stop your hope, if you have any hope of us getting back together, he said, let me put that to one side. Let you park that. He said, the thought of being intimate with you at any given moment in the future makes me want to throw up. And that stayed with me for about 6 years. I didn't see myself as a woman after that. I was an incubator, I was a mother, but I wasn't a woman. And then, yes, the divorce went through. I then met my successor, so the lady who had become the stepmother to my children. And I instantly fell in love with her, not in a romantic sense, but I expected to hate her. I demanded to meet her because I said she's spending time around my kids.
Yeah.
So I demanded to meet her, expecting to loathe her, hate her. The opposite happened. Instantly we liked each other. She was the most beautiful woman. She had these piercing blue eyes and was just shook me. She shook me by both hands and said, it's an absolute delight to meet you. And that was that. We were friends, and we would chat. In fact, it was her I dealt with more than with him when it came to access to the children. But when I did have any interaction with him, there was always the threat of some kind of violence. Never did anything, but always the threat of it. There was also the fact that he was a very, very wealthy man, and he lied to all the authorities here. So I got absolutely nothing. He did try and take half of the house, even though he'd put nothing in. Fortunately, the law did protect me against that. So I did get the equity from the house, but we were still brassic. I mean, we still had nothing. We lived in a tiny little, it was very quaint, little 3-bedroom cottage in this village that we've lived in for 20 years. It's a classic little quintessential English village. It's lovely, with a little church, little pub, little village shop. And the kids went to preschool here, junior school, and so on. But he would have loved to have destroyed that. You know, he told I'm not going to use their names just to protect them, but this particular lady, that his mission was to destroy me, so that eventually, so that the children would have a pretty shitty childhood. Or am I allowed to swear? Pretty shitty childhood, sorry. And so when they were ready to kind of have the proper lifestyle, because he did move to the States, he lived in Ohio for 7 years. With a swimming pool and everything. He said, so when they were ready for the real lifestyle, they'd come and live with us. Sadly for him, he got convicted of stalking a much younger woman, which was an interesting
Here
one.
in the States, correct?
No, he got convicted in the UK.
Oh, in the UK.
It was a girl that worked for him. And fortunately for him, he managed to get a green card to work in the US, which was an interesting one. But he did work in the US for a while. But he then started seeing a new lady. He'd stolen £150,000 from this poor lass, and she had to go back to Holland, to the Netherlands. But her and I stayed in touch. He then met somebody else in the UK who he would come back and stay with every month whilst he was in the US, and she was called, I'm going to call her Alex, and she was based in London, but she was originally from Venezuela. And she was a delight as well. She was another one who I just fell instantly in love with. She's an amazing woman. So he would come back every month from the US. That was part of the agreement, apparently, with his employer. And his word, he would say, I'm coming back to spend the weekend with my children. He would literally come and spend sort of 6 or 7 hours with them. Sometimes they would go and have an overnight up in London with Alex and him. And then one evening, this was the fateful evening, it was just in between Christmas and New Year, Alex and him went to Holland, and she noticed that he was getting rather a lot of messages, and so he was always terribly protective about his phone. I never bothered looking at his phone, but she grabbed it out of his hand in a restaurant, and he hit her as hard as he could, and she flew across the room. He was then held down by various other men. She ran to the hotel to go and get the car. And I may have a few facts wrong here in terms of how she managed to get the details off the phone. I think he got back into the hotel room. He assaulted her in there, but she managed to get some details off his phone of 2 other women, both in America, weirdly enough. One that he was engaged to, and the other one he was having an affair with. So he was actually leading a triple life. I mean, a double life wasn't enough for him. So it was a triple life. And I then had to break the news to my children, because they were of an age where they'd made friends with Alex's boys. They were all over social media, and they were out for his blood, because he'd nearly killed their mother, basically. And so this little group, she'd managed to get hold of one of the American girls who was heartbroken. She thought she was getting married within 6 months. Suddenly her world was shattered. And we formed a little chat group. Myself, my immediate successor, the lovely American lady, and the Venezuelan, and we called ourselves Charlie's Angels. And with that group, the truth came out because we would talk, and what was I found was so, and this is where the movie Love comes in. What I found and we all found so comforting, surprising, healing. Not only was the support that we had for each other and the love of, and we are still, by the way, all very much in touch. And I'm going back to the year 2016. So 6 years we've been amazing friends. But was the patterns of behavior that as a narcissist, and the interesting thing was that the lady that replaced me, who was the lady who he stole all the money from, who had to go back to Holland, knew him from before he met me. So they were kind of a bit of a reunion themselves. He'd been married before, as I mentioned, to me. So he'd been married before me. He stalked her as well. But he also, and this is apparently, I have to say allegedly, because I have no way of knowing if it's fact, but that he had another girlfriend whose mother he threw down the stairs. So there was a pattern. I didn't obviously know about any of this when I met him, when I married him, and when I had children with him.
Of course.
But so this friendship that we formed between the four of us women, the most unlikely of friends, we should have all hated each other. That was the truth of it. I have the most amazing photograph of four of us, because the American lady flew in from Cincinnati. Alex came in, well, actually we all stayed with Alex in London because that's where she was based, the Venezuelan lady. I came up from Sussex, and the other lady came over from Holland, and we had an evening in a wine bar, and there's the most amazing photograph of standing on a table and jumping, and they caught me, and it's a fantastic picture. It's so evocative of what actually happened. They saved me, and in many ways I saved them, but they'd all fallen in love with my kids, and they wanted to save my children from the toxicity and the poison that what he really was. So after that whole experience, I then made my final email to the man who'd lived in my head for far too long. And I said, enough now. You have lied about everything from the Porsche that you drive, you told me was rented, whereas you'd bought it a year before. Just little things. You've lied to the courts. I've been accused of Munchausen's by proxy, which means that I've poisoned my children. I've been he took me to court for psychological abuse on the children, that I was an alcoholic and a drug abuser. I've never taken a drug in my life. I'm gonna be honest with you here. I wish I had.
I've said the same thing to my therapist. Can I just be a drug addict and not have to think about these things?
Yeah, exactly. You know what? I have said to my husband before I die, I'd love to just try just one. But no, and
we're not
I've had
promoting drugs by any means around here. We're just discussing past experiences. So continue.
Yeah, absolutely. And the accusations that are just so. The fabulous thing was about all these accusations is I could negate them all. I could absolutely show the court that they were malicious allegations, because I had a fantastic relationship with my GP and the children's GP, who's their doctor. I had a fantastic relationship with the headmistress. He didn't even know. I think he knew where they went to school when they were at primary school. He never knew where they went to school at secondary. He never asked. He never bothered. It wasn't kept from him. He just never bothered to ask. So I had a fantastic relationship with the headmistress. I also was in part-time employment with the police and the fire service, so they could absolutely they could say, no, she's not an alcoholic. She turns up for work, because I used to work in road safety. But I said, you have lied about everything. You've lied about some of the most awful personal things about me, about the way I parent our children. You've also lied about all the women, the prostitutes. You've lied about the triple life. You've lied about when you stalked that lady. What he didn't know was we had a representative in court. He would never have recognized, but we had somebody there when he was sentenced. And some of the details of the crime that he committed over a 9-month period. He was in his 50s, a very powerful man in terms of the business he was in. She was 31, and I spoke to her myself. She had me crying my eyes out because I couldn't believe what he'd put her through.
Yeah.
Also, with this I didn't want to be in court because I was scared. So we had this male representative who worked for my husband, or worked with my husband, who made notes, and they were terrifying. The magistrate, when they convicted him and found him guilty, used expressions like, "You are a man of extremely poor character. You are a danger to women. You are a prolific liar." And they even mentioned I would suspect, although they were very straight about, they weren't psychologists, that you have narcissistic personality disorder. And so I wrote my final email to him, which said, "Enough now. I've done years of you not paying rent in my head. So I am going to evict you. You will now, from here on in, if the children want to have anything to do with you, you will be dealing with my husband." Because he had an interesting thing that he wouldn't bully men.
Oh, of course not.
Funny that, isn't it? Yeah, they don't bully men.
Not.
And also because my husband is, he works in corporate, he's a corporate man. He's a property developer. He's a chartered surveyor. Grey rock comes naturally to him. So whenever he had to, whenever I had dealings with my ex, if he threw abuse at me, I would come back with an emotional response, which was, of course, just adding fuel to the fire.
Yes.
Whereas my husband would simply come back and say, "Noted, but could you just let us know when you'd like to see the children, and we'll let you know if they'd like to see you." And of course, the email that would come back would be 2 pages long, and he would grey rock him again and say, "I repeat what I said before." And so I've never had any dealings with him since then. And then, apart from the court case, where at the end of the court case, and just to give you ladies a little bit of hope, if you've got truth on your side and you keep the evidence, and I put everything in writing, and I kept everything in writing, his barrister came up to me after the court case, because part of the agreement was I was going to use what they call, this is a British legal term, my best endeavors. It's a very strong legal term, to get the children to see him. That's what I had to do. And they said, could he see them this weekend, as he was in the UK? And I said to the judge at the time, I said, absolutely, if they want to. I said, they are 14 and 15 years old, or they were 13 and 14, I forget. And I said, but what I will not do, sir, is I will not drag them by their hair.
Yeah.
Because that's child abuse.
Yes.
If I can persuade them, and I will use my best endeavors to do that, they will be there, but I will not pull them by their hair and drag them into a car and then drag them out of a car. I will not do that, sir, because that is child abuse. And if that puts me behind bars for not doing that, I will do my time. And the judge looked at me and he said, I totally hear what you're saying. And afterwards, I just saw the fiery face of the narcissist for the last time, who looked like he was about to explode with anger, because I'd managed to keep my composure. I had truth on my side. I had written evidence. And his barrister came up to me afterwards and said, do you think there's any chance of the children meeting up with him on Saturday? And I said, I have no idea, but I will be honest with you, it's unlikely. But I'm going to, as the judge said, use my best endeavors. And he looked at me and he said, don't push too hard. And I just said, what do you mean by that? And he said, just don't push them too hard. He said, I can't say any more than that. And I saw in this man's eyes, he knew what he'd been dealing with. And he didn't want my children to have any contact with their father, even though he'd been representing him. But he managed to corner me or collar me in the car park and warn me what he had seen. And so I guess the end of my story is that during the course of this, I did meet an old friend at a reunion, who is now my husband. I've been with him for 12 years. He is an incredible man. He has taken on the children and as his own. So 12 years ago, my youngest would have been 6, and my eldest was 7. And he's brought them up and never been in their face. We didn't live together for the first 3 years. We just dated. He lived in London, I lived in the UK. And then we bought the house that we live in now, which is a lovely family home in the middle of nowhere in this little village, which is really quaint, with our mad Labrador and our crazy psychotic cat. And he's been incredible. And in that time, my ex has definitely been more absent. He didn't contact my eldest daughter for 5 years. He missed her 17th, her 18th, her 19th, and then she's recently turned 20, and he sent her an email out of the blue saying, another milestone. Let's not be strangers. There was no card, there was no gift. I mean, we right from the outset, my husband gave him some advice and said, why don't you send them postcards? You know, don't tell us that you're blocked. If the children have chosen to block you, that's social media, or social media. But you know what I mean. But we have a letterbox that's never blocked. Write to them. We know you can write letters, because we've got 4-page letters of love that you wrote to the lady in America, because she posted those to us. Oh yeah, I've got those. We know you can write, so do it. And he never did. And so this, when I got, it's recently been my daughter's 20th, and I said, how did that make you feel? And I will be very careful here. She just wrote, what a see you next Tuesday. Now, I don't know whether that's an expression that you use in the States. See you next Tuesday. No, it's a very rude word. It spells something. It's not a nice word, but basically.
Oh, we're speaking the letter C. Are we speaking the letter C, not C?
We are.
I got it. See you next Tuesday. Such an apropos title for him.
That was my
appropriate.
Well, I just found it fascinating that, because what I wanted to know because I've never wanted to stop. If the children want to have a relationship with their biological father, I will never stop that. I want them to go in armed with information. I want them to go in knowing that truth is not his strongest point. There's the understatement of the century. There is manipulation there. He's not quite cut from the same cloth as us, in the sense that we have values, we have morals, we have scruples. We don't cheat, we don't lie, we're not unkind, we don't beat people up. So we're a little bit different as a family. So as long as they're okay with that, they must have a relationship with him. Turns out they're not okay with that at the moment. They may well be in the future, I don't know. But that was my first thought for my daughter. My first thought for her was, how was it going to make her feel? And as I say, she said, what, I'll see you next Tuesday. And I've spoken to her since then, because I'm going to see her in Nottingham. She's going to come with me to the event, because I think it's very good for her to watch the film as a preventative measure.
Yes.
Because the reality is, I've brought up two very kind, very loving, very happy, very comfortable in their own skin young ladies. They are chalk and cheese. I can't even begin to tell you how different they are. They're very close in age, but they're very different characters. But my biggest fear is that they're empaths. I've brought them up to be empathetic. I've brought them up. One wants to be a paramedic, the other one wants to work in humanitarian aid. They're targets. Everybody that is targeted by these narcissistic nutters is kind, compassionate, generous, loving, caring, wants to fix people. They don't go for hard, nasty narcissists themselves. That just wouldn't work. And so for my children, I want them to watch this film, because I want them to be aware of the fact that abuse is wrapped up in a big word called love. And it's terrifying.
You had me, you had tears. You got tears going in telling your story.
Bless you.
I want to talk about the movie, but before we do that, share about your books. Tell me the title of your best-selling book. Let's talk about the books for a minute.
Okay, well, this blog, The books are insane. Okay. I, apart from having gone through this very, very dark time, and it does get described actually in the books. The books are my heart on a plate. But I, much like you, I started writing a blog about not being able to compete with the perfect people in the world. And I've always seen social media as the sales and marketing department of everybody's lives. And I arrived in this quintessential affluent little village in the south of England where everybody's lives were perfect. It was like something out of the Truman Show, or Stepford Wives. And so I would hit the playground and realize that I was utterly hopeless. You know, I would forget permission slips. I would sometimes forget the children. So seriously, I'd driven to school before and then walked home, reported the car stolen. Dreadful. Anyway, so I decided, rather than trying to compete with these perfect people, that I would post on a blog about my disasters, because some of them were so funny. I mean, I was on a comedy show here telling a story about my blind dating period. It did not go well. And in the midst of all this, the following got bigger and bigger and bigger. It's called The Menopausal Mayhem Mothers. It's on Facebook. And people started to say, Emma, you've got to write a book. You've got to write a book. You've got to write a book. And I had no idea how to write a book. I mean, a book's got to have a beginning, a middle, and an end, right? And I can't even organize the beginning, middle, and end of my days, let alone a book. Anyway, I
adore you already. I'm just
it's so true though. Getting up. I mean, most mornings the same leg or both legs go in the same pajama bottom and face plant. You know, I've done dog walks before with no trousers on. The whole thing. Awful. I have my mind whirring all the time, but I've always been like this. And then, of course, I hit the menopause, and tenfold, it went completely off the chart. So I decided one day, okay, do you know what? I'm going to give it a go. So I wrote this book, and it's called Confessions of the Menopausal Mayhem Mother. And it is literally the story. And as I said to you right at the beginning, the first 2 lines of this book say, 2 blue lines. How did that happen? I'm married to a man that doesn't love me. And though that is literally the first 2 lines of Confessions of the Menopausal Mayhem Mother. Now, if anyone were to go onto Amazon and have a look at the reviews, I think I've got something like 650 reviews on there. The books are, generally speaking, described as wet yourself funny. You know, people, the people who've written it just said, literally, make sure you've either been to the loo before you start reading them, have your incontinence pants on, do not have your mouth full of coffee, because it will end up all over the book. And yes, that's the and then I wrote the second book, which is called Mad Dogs and a Menopausal Englishwoman, because another little member of the gang was called Spencer, who was my golden Labrador, who just he had an ASBO, which in English means an antisocial behavior order. So he actually had a criminal record, my Labrador. I think he's the only Labrador in the world. He got done for shoplifting on Christmas Eve. It was in the village shop. He ate all the bacon. It was horrible. And I'd lost complete control. And of course, had face planted the floor of the shop because he tripped me up as I'd walked in, and then proceeded to just steal everything he could. But they made up an ASBO for me, which I thought, and framed it, which I think it's still in the pub, in the local pub. But yeah, he was a disaster, but an adorable big yellow disaster. And so when he passed away, when he was put to sleep, I wrote another book, which is of a similar timeline, but actually there were some more stories that came to my head about what had happened with him and me, but also with the kids. But also prior to that, I did 11 years of traveling around the world on my own. And this is what I was talking to you about what it's like before you're abused, during your abuse, and who you end up being afterwards. And the Emma before the abuse, and some of the stories from the traveling, because there are people I'm still in touch with from my days in Australia, States. I did South Africa, Corsica, Italy, France, on my own, completely on my own. But there are people I'm still in touch with who say they're still recovering. They're still in therapy. And that girl, I don't know who she was, I don't know who she was. She was brave. She was crazy. She was chaotic. She was also fearless. And she was very trusting. When I think about it, 11 years of backpacking and hitchhiking. And then I met him. And then I had 20 years of becoming a mother, but an abused mother, and a protective mother, a mother who was lived in fear that this man would one day, because this was my biggest fear, would pick up my children and drive them to Beachy Head, which is very near us, and drive off a cliff and kill them just to spite me. And now I feel I'm a survivor. I have come out the other side. I still fear for my life sometimes. I have police all around me on watch. We have the house has what we call a red flag on it, not literally a red flag, because that actually red light, possibly we should not have that over the door. Not a good idea. But yeah, it's a police red flag. But the post-trauma Emma is quite anxious. I talk very openly. I do a lot of public speaking because I'm a journalist, and I'm a writer, and I have to do that. But I'm very shy now. I'm very withdrawn. I blame myself for everything. I internalize everything. My poor husband, who's actually one of the nicest people you could meet, he's my best friend in the world. But if he even so much as says, "Oh, I don't think you've, or if I haven't quite made the dinner right," or that needs a bit more salt, straight away my back will flinch. And he says, no, it's fine. I just like salty food. I'm very reactive. I don't like to go out. Going up to Nottingham for me to go to the this event where it's the global 16 days of activism. I would say that I will probably hyperventilate. I'll probably have two or three panic attacks before I go. I've got nothing to be scared of, but I'm getting on a train, and I'm going up to Nottingham, and I'm seeing my daughter, and I'm seeing my friend Sam Beckinsale, and I'm seeing various other women, and it's good. And once I'm there, I'll be fine. But this is a girl who would get on an aeroplane, fly 23 hours to the other side of the globe with nobody to go to, with $250 in her back pocket. He's changed me, and what I've been through has changed me as a human being. But there is hope. And I cling on to that hope. And I realize that I may have battle scars, and I may still be afraid. I wish I wasn't. But I have come out of it okay. And that film, and I'm sorry to take it back to the film again, but the books are really all about, it's about seeing the humorous side of life, and the fact that the wrecking ball comes in, and you've got two options. You either cry, you sit in a corner and cry and take that well-deserved nervous breakdown and run with it, or you get up and you put one foot in front of the other, and you breathe in and you breathe out. And even when the world feels like you are in Dorothy's house and you're spinning and you're spinning spinning, you just have to get on with it. And if you can find funny in some of it, if you can find funny, find it. Because I have found that laughter for me has been the best medicine. And that was, and interestingly, one of our biggest weapons against my abuser, against all those other ladies abuser, in other words, the other ladies that he abused. He became a figure of ridicule for us because of certain things, certain little secrets that we shared with one another. But also some of his really gross habits that obviously, they always say that, the narcissist will go out of his way to impress the rest of the world. And yet when he turns inwards to the people that really matter, he's foul. And so we used to share these vile little habits that he had, and we would howl with laughter. And that was therapy all on its own. And don't worry, I didn't share that in the books. No, I decided not to go for the whole Emma, let's go to prison thing. The books are fun. They're full of hope. But once again, as I say, the film itself, what it's done for me is take away the shame. Because for years I have lived with the shame of the fact that my dream of getting married, having two beautiful little girls, living in a beautiful little village with the white picket fence, everybody's dream, was all wrong. And it was all.
Let's talk about that. Let's go into talking about the movie. As far as your books, you and I am sure are now lifelong communicating with each other. And I will be seeing you, of course, when I'm there in December. And I'll actually be back in London for a couple of days in March. So if I could squeeze you in there, we may get together again there. But I want to make sure that we get the links for your books. And I would be honored to have you back another time to do kind of just a reading out of the books. Can we do that?
Oh my God, yes. As long as you don't mind foul language.
I love your foul language. So,
oh my God, it's especially when it's done with this ridiculous English plummy voice.
Oh God, no, for us in the US, love. I mean, I'm just like, so it was actually, as you and I were talking before we went on, it was actually the books that got you involved with the new movie Love.
Yeah, it was serendipity.
Yes,
it was absolutely fatalistic. And yes, it was the books that got Jason involved with me, and then Fit. And as I say, he just said, look, I'm just going to ping this link across, see what you think, if you're interested in promoting it. But I watched it as you did and was breathless. And Sam Beckinsale is a very well-known actor here in the UK. Yes. She was in a fantastic series called London's Burning. Mm-hmm. So her narration, her voice, which is, as she says, she is woman, is so unbelievably powerful because she's an amazing actor. And it just blew me away because it talked to me. It actually was like my head, the voice inside my head, the voices that I could never, ever find talking to me.
Right. I think those were almost the words after I had watched it and I had emailed back to all of you. And mind you, at that point, I didn't know who you had CC'd on there. I didn't realize that I was actually, emailing Sam and Jason and everyone involved. That's the exact same thoughts that I had in watching that. It was so much of what I've learned over the years in my healing. Yes, but having it put into identifiable words that someone else can understand. So survivor to survivor, we can say, I'm having this thought, or this is what I went through, or this is what I was thinking at that time. And we're just like, okay, almost telepathic. I get it, right? I get it. Whereas trying to explain it to people who don't get it, they look at us cross-eyed. They think we're crazy. Something's wrong with us. Or, well, I wouldn't have put up with that. I would have left at the first sign. Like, I saw this movie and I told all of you that I had to be involved in promoting it. I don't care what it takes. I'm not taking a dime for this. I just have to be involved in promoting this because this movie needs to be seen.
Absolutely. And I think what's really important is there's not a fist clench. There's not a punch thrown.
No.
There's nothing that is going to. I say there's nothing that's going to trigger people. Of course, it's a dark subject, so I can't say it's not going to trigger people. But it's been done so beautifully. I mean, Jason's art. I mean, he's such a craftsman. I mean, he's an award-winning director. The music, the imagery, the people, and then Sam's narration over the top. I mean, actually, I'm talking about it now and every hair is standing up on my body.
Me too.
Because it is not anything that you'd expect it to be. It's something that is so compelling to watch that you can't stop watching it. That's what I found. I've never, every time I've started to watch it again, to think, actually, I'm just going to watch the first third. Just want to watch, or the second third. No, I have to watch it all the way because we can't stop. And as you and I spoke earlier, for victims, for survivors, for victims' families, for victims' friends, but actually the world as a whole, whether it be the police force, I mean, to get the US police to just get one big senior guy to watch it and go, wow,
Yeah.
That's what it looks like, because I think that's the most isolating part, is when you say to people, well, you exactly what you said, why didn't you leave? Well, the film explains why women don't just leave.
Yes.
And it explains why we feel the shame and the guilt, and how we get reeled back in again,
Yes.
the love bombing and the the hoovering, or whatever they call it.
Yep.
It's so powerful. But the film talks so gently to you that it's almost subconscious, and it's therapy to me. I mean,
it absolutely was. What got me was, yes, I cried through the entire thing. And yes, the entire movie was triggering from the aspect of, I was never able to put that into words. I was never even able to fully understand that. Like, looking back, there was one section in there, and I think I had told you and Sam and Jason and everyone, I'm not sure, but where she was talking about suicide, and how she knew that she had to go through with this because she had to save him from her. She had to save her children from her, because of course, we're these horrible people, and we are just a disgrace, and we're disgusting, and we're vile, and we're just, we're a burden to the world, and we're a burden to our families. And when I heard Sam talking about that, I might get emotional again. I sobbed, because that part in my life, December of 2018, was when I had a plan, and I was in the midst of taking my life. And it's something that I acknowledge and I identify, and I know that that's there, but it's compartmentalized, because there's only certain parts you can only take one spoonful at a time. And when I heard Sam talk about that, I sobbed, because it took me back to that very day that I was sitting on my couch, and I knew exactly what I was going to do. And those were my exact thoughts. It wasn't that I didn't want to exist anymore. It was that I needed to save everyone from me, because I'm this horrible being and I don't belong on this earth. And yet they're the ones who brainwashed us to get us there. The movie talks about the loss of life, the M word. I'm not going to say that word because Facebook will violate me, but the M word, unalive someone, loss of life. That not only is that physical, not only does that happen physically at the hands of the perpetrator, but it happens at the hands of the victims and survivors. And it also happens psychologically and emotionally. And Sam said she was an empty husk.
Yeah.
This movie,
there's nothing left.
Nothing. This
you are literally I mean, and do you know the tragedy of that? You feel like an empty vessel. You feel like there's nothing, you've got nothing left to give. In fact, you've got nothing to give because you're worthless.
Yes.
Because they've told you enough. They've ground you down over the years. You are, and they're brilliant with timing. I mean, the timing is always immaculate.
Yes.
Just when you're getting back up again, bang, down you go. But the reality is, they're the empty vessel.
Yes.
That's the tragedy.
Yes.
They're the cardboard cutout. When you flick past the exterior, there's nothing there. There is no emotion. There's no compassion. There's no empathy. They don't know how to feel love.
None.
I mean, I don't know about you, but I've got friendships that go back to the age of 4. In fact, my oldest friend in the world, I knew before she was born. I mean, I was there when she was born. My family, I've got a huge extended family, but I've got friends that I was at school with, people I traveled with all those years ago, and they've stayed in my life. I've got an array of, I'm so fortunate.
Yeah.
But you take a classic narcissist and somebody who is an abuser. And this is one of the things I've said to my children. I said, if nothing else, just check out their background, check out their friends. How long have they known them for? Have they, because my ex knows no one. He has maybe 2 or 3 friends that he works with, but he's every single job he's lost, he's been removed from. Every relationship that he's ever left, there's been police involved. And every single friendship that he's ever had has ended badly.
Yeah.
And so he has no long-term friends. And he has, the only ally he has in terms of family is his mother. And that's it.
Of course. I have a video that I did some time back, and I think I may have dropped it again last night. Our babies. I did a video on are you pre-qualifying the people in your life, right? Where I've talked about to get our driver's license, to buy a home, to get our medical insurance, to travel, to do anything, we have to go through this qualification process in order to be eligible, right? And yet, we have to do that with employment, apply, prove who we are, this is my resume, these are my transcripts. And yet the people who we allow in our lives, we're not doing that background check. We're not checking their references. We're not, seeing if they are exactly who they say they are, because we're investing this before we utilize this. And it's the same thing that you try to tell your daughters. Like we have to teach our children, we have to teach society, we have to bring this movie to the forefront and show people this is what it looks like. So before you even get into this, educate yourself on domestic violence, narcissistic abuse, on hoovering, gaslighting, cognitive dissonance, everything that goes along with it. Prepare yourself, become that knowledgeable employer before you employ anyone into your life.
Yeah.
This movie,
absolutely.
Yeah, I'm in agreement. It needs to be seen by everyone, by completely everyone. As you know, I am so honored that Sam is going to be with me on Friday, and I will be having her interview on Friday to share her story and talk about the movie. Can you tell me the release date? The international release date is December 16th. Is that correct?
November 16th.
November 16th. Is that?
Yeah, that's the first screening, but the film is
Correct.
already available on Vimeo online.
Okay.
So people can download it.
You and I are going to have to chat after, and I'm going to have to get the link for that so I can go ahead and start providing that as soon as people can get over to it. So that answers the questions that I had in regards to the movie. I didn't realize it was available now.
Yeah.
So I'm definitely going to be pushing that. Emma, my love, I am so blessed. I am so honored. Serendipitous that yes, you reached out to me, and now I honestly, I would love to remain lifelong friends with you because I love you. I told you when we first got on the call, I'm already in love with you. I already adore you. I'm so excited.
You're so lovely. You're so kind. And I can't tell you, do you know, people like you are not 10 a penny. You're 1 in a million. And we need more people like you. We really do. We really do need more people who are prepared to put themselves out there, share their story, and we will save lives, my love. We will.
Yes.
And that is the reason I want to do this. I don't want anybody else to go through what I went through, what you've been through, what all your followers are going through right now. And if I really hope that they can take something away from what I've talked about, but what you are doing is just extraordinary. It's absolutely brilliant. And I'm in awe of you. So I can't wait to meet you in London. Oh my goodness. We're going to have the biggest hug.
Oh, we are. I cannot wait. I cannot wait to hug you. I cannot wait to hug Sam. I'm super excited to see y'all in December. In the meantime, I'm going to ask you to hold on as I kind of sign off here so that you and I can chat. I still the tears are like I'm trying to hold them back through this because I did my makeup really pretty today. So
You look absolutely gorgeous. I look terrible.
oh darling, you're gorgeous as it is.
Oh no, no, please. The weather here is dreadful, so I'm having a really bad hair day. I mean, I've had to stick the glasses on the head.
Well, I love you just as you are. So there we go.
You're very lovely. Likewise.
Y'all, this is truly amazing. As I have been dropping on the feed, on TikTok, on Instagram, on Twitter, on YouTube, on everywhere that I've got it posted, I'm going to be posting additional information so that you can get access. You can have access to take a look at this movie. Everyone needs to see it.
Yeah. I mean, I think as a parting remark from me, it's not, obviously survivors, victims are going to get so much out of it.
Oh, yeah.
But you have to see it. There's no point in thinking about it. You have to watch it. But then the only thing that we ask of people is once they've seen it, we know that it's going to blow people's minds, because if you look at some of the reviews from serious DA advocates and so on, we know that it's an incredible piece of art, an incredible piece of therapy. But then tell somebody else about it.
Oh, yes.
Because you just never know. I worked in road safety for 10 years. For a decade, I educated the road safety, the emergency services. But I also did lectures to various children of the ages of 17, because of course at 17 we drive here, about I gave away a free software package. And I remember saying to, but it was a news channel, they asked me why I did what I did. And I said, if I save one life, then my job is done.
Yeah.
And if we can save one life, if we can save one lady, if we can save one man, one child, then job done. But if we can save millions, how amazing is that? This film will do that. I have no doubts whatsoever. And like you, I'm not financially invested in this at all. None. I just watched it and went, wow.
Yeah.
That was, so yeah, everybody has to watch it.
Miss Emma, thank you. Thank you so much.
It's an absolute joy. Thank you. I'm delighted. Lots of love to America.